right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of SoTellUs Time. We are super excited, as always, to be with you guys today. This is going to be a really fun one. Troy and I obviously are back in the studio, which is nice. Our audio is going to be way better in video than last time. I mean, the funny thing is what happened last week that you guys didn't even know about was in the middle of the Zoom, or the end of the Zoom, we were finishing it up, and all of a sudden my phone is what I was having to do the Zoom on. It like blows up the screen and is like, overheating, it's too hot over here. And I'm like, I am in Big Bear Lake, California. It is not too hot here, but it was freaking out. So literally Troy kind of finished it up, and then I ran inside and I cooled it down real quick and like threw it in the fridge to cool it down fast and all this, and jumped back on, and luckily Troy was still on the Zoom, and then I was able to join in for the final moments of the SoTellUs Time last week. So you guys didn't see that. Yeah. You guys did not see that. We edited it and cut it, and it was really awesome. So today we are going to be talking about something a little bit different, and it's to get your minds opened and thinking about, do I have things set up properly in my business? We're talking about partners and spouses today. Now, some people might go, what do spouses have to do with my business? And then other people are like, oh man, yeah, I know. And so we're going to talk about both. And we've talked about partners a little bit in the past, but we haven't talked really too much about spouses, and they can play a big role, especially based on how you have it set up. And a lot of people have different emotions and feelings about how it should be set up, your business, when you have a spouse. But we're going to talk about that and share some stories with you about that. So a business partner and a spouse, they can make or break your business based on how you have this set up. So Troy, let's just go ahead and jump right into business partners.
All right, so let's just talk about this. When you're starting up your business, the best way to start a business is to define how it is going to end.
Yep.
And by what I mean by that is, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to think about this, right? Even if you've already started your business, you're 5 years down the road, you still need to think about these questions.
Absolutely.
So what happens if you have a partner in your business? So let's say there's 2 of you, 3 of you, doesn't matter, right? But there are partners in the business. What happens when you sell the business?
Yeah.
How is it going to end, right? What happens if the business fails and you go under? How is that going to end? Who's going to be responsible for the debt or whatever, right? Yep. The assets. Think about that. What happens if one partner wants to leave the business and the other one doesn't? They want to stay in the business and own the business. So do you have things in place to buy out your partner? Right? These are all really important things that you need to be thinking about, because the worst thing that can happen is you don't put anything in place in the beginning. Yeah. And then when this finally happens to you, now you're scrambling, now you're fighting with your partner, saying, well, no, I put this money in at the beginning, or I paid for this, and I should get paid back for that first. Absolutely. I've seen this happen time and time again in businesses where, they had a good business together, things were going great, and then when the end comes to the business, they all of a sudden hate each other and they part ways and they never talk to each other ever again.
Yeah, and let me add to that a little bit. Is one thing about that, if let's say the money thing. Let's say you put money into the business, and you put more money into the business than your business partner did.
Right.
Well, you better have something written up that states that you get that money back before anything else is split.
Exactly.
Right? Because that'll happen, and that actually just happened recently in a personal situation of someone that I know, that they bought. It was a marriage. Well, they weren't married, but they were living together. And she had quite a bit of money from selling her house. She put it into the next house, and then they ended up splitting, and they did have kids together. And when they split, she thought she was going to get her money back in full, and then the profits would be split. And that is not the way that it went, because there was no agreement written up prior to.
Yeah, so they were selling the house, right?
Yep.
And she'd put all the money down, and so she thought, well, hey, I'm going to get all that money back. Mm-hmm. But in the end, the lawyers said, nope.
It's all split.
Split.
So
50-50.
That $100,000 that she had put down of her own money, had nothing to do with this guy, he got half of that.
Yeah, and you know, and to think about that, those can kind of be awkward situations, right? Where you're like, "Hey, we love each other. We're going to buy this house together.
Yep.
But I need you to sign this piece of paper that you've got that all the money that I put in, I get back when we sell the house," right?
Yeah.
Kind of an awkward thing, but you really do have to do that in order to protect yourself, because when you come to the end, you know, you're not going to have that protection. Another thing is assets, you know. So when you're starting up a new business, or maybe even you've been in business for a while and you bring an asset into the business, whether it's machinery or whatever it might be that you paid for, right? What happens in the end? Do you get paid back for that asset?
Right.
So those are all things that you really need to be thinking about in your business. Again, if you can do this in the very beginning and you can define it all out, that's the best time to do it, because at that point, there's no hard feelings. And we all know money changes people, right?
Absolutely.
Like everyone's always like, "Oh no, I would totally be cool. You know, like we would split everything. It's awesome," until there's actually $2 to split, and then they want $1.50 of it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? So the best time to do it is in the beginning, when there is nothing tangible that you're actually fighting over.
Exactly.
So that's one of the ways you want to take care of partners. Another thing is you want to define your roles in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And this is important. You know, what are the responsibilities of each partner? What is each person going to be doing on a daily basis?
Right.
You know, what skills are they bringing to the business? And this is another place where we see a lot of tension, right? Because you may see, you know, you have one partner that's kind of the operation side of it, the other person who's kind of the sales side of it. And we've seen this so many times where it's like, hey, they get sales coming in, the company's doing good. And then the sales guy goes, "Psh, we're doing good. I'm not going to go out and work anymore.
Yeah.
Let's just live off of what we got." And the operation guy's going, "Well, I'm working 50 hours a week to keep this going. And you're not working, you're off playing because we got our sales."
Totally.
So, you know, defining those responsibilities up front are really important. You know, what are the expectations of each partner?
Yeah, and I actually know another business that had the same problem. These two business partners came together, they formed a great business, everything was going really well, but they just had different ideas of like when they would show up to work. Like one of them liked to be home in the morning and he would help his wife get the kids off to school. He'd even take them to school sometimes. He'd then go to the gym. So he was showing up later in the day and then working later into the evening. And the other guy was showing up at like 4 a.m. And he was working hard through, you know, most of the day. And then by like 2 or 3 in the afternoon when the kids were getting off, he was bouncing home to go help his wife with the kids and do all this stuff. And they were getting mad because the one's working till like 6 or 7 at night because he's coming in later. And I mean, again, that's communication, but that's expectations from the get-go.
Exactly.
You know, and that would have taken care of that problem.
Yep, exactly. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is worst case scenario. What happens if a partner is unable to work or dies?
Yep.
Right? We always joke with our team, like, you know, what happens if you're walking across the street tomorrow and you get hit by a beer truck?
Yeah, totally.
You know, how are we going to make sure your job goes forward? And it's the same thing with your partners. You know, Trevor and I have our responsibilities. What Trevor does, I don't necessarily know how to do. What I do, Trevor doesn't know how to do, right? But, first off and foremost, do you have key man policies in place? And if you don't know what a key man policy is, it's basically an insurance policy on partners or employees of the business. So that if something happens to them, you get paid an insurance, you know, a lump sum of money so that you can continue to operate the business while they're gone.
Think, oh, that's so morbid. That's morbid. No, that's not morbid. And there's a reason too, because we're going to talk about spouses here in a little bit too, and something that we've set up in our company, but also it's to help continue to run that business.
Yes.
You've got a hole in your business now that needs to not only be filled, and you might just be filling it with an employee at that point, but you still are going to have a period of time of finding that employee. You know, they're probably not going to, we know they're not going to do as good a job as your partner was doing. So there's a reason for having this. You want to make sure that the business continues to have success.
Yep, exactly. So that's the financial protection, right? The next thing is, you know, do you have documented logins? Do you have procedures that will train someone else to do that job? And that's really important. Like for myself, when I go through and I close out the company books and everything at the end of the month, I actually have a checklist that I've created so that someone else could just go down my checklist and do the job. So if I die, Trevor could use that checklist and he could go down and he could close out the month and the numbers and everything for the month. So do you have those things in place? And I know you're always like, oh, I don't have time for that. Well, you don't have time for that until something horrible happens.
Exactly.
And then you don't have time to deal with that.
Exactly.
So, and then also, the other question is, what happens to your partner's equity at that point? If they aren't, if they can't work in the business anymore or they die, have you determined what's going to go on with their equity? Is it going to go to a spouse? Is it going to be a buyout? We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
But you need to define that now before you get in that situation. All right, Trevor, so take us on to the spouse.
Okay, well, kind of playing off of that whole equity thing, I hope the equity does not go to the spouse. That is going to create some major problems, let me tell you. And trust me, we've gone through everything. We've consulted with our financial advisors and lawyers and everything to make sure that we have it all in place properly. And they brought up some really good points. Like we originally thought, like, oh yeah, the equity could roll over to our spouses and they could, continue to get some sort of payout. And maybe not even the equity, but some sort of like payout for a long time and all this stuff.
I remember one of the things we talked about was like, well, let's just take whatever the partner was making.
Yeah.
Let's subtract out what we have to pay an employee to go do that job, and then the leftover goes to the spouse.
For like life.
Yeah, for life. That was one of the ideas we had.
Yeah, we had some different ideas, and definitely the lawyers and financial advisors were like, dude, they put a lot of holes in those ideas. And because, think of one scenario like they gave to us is, so Troy dies. His wife takes over the equity.
Why am I always the one dying?
Everything, well, I already had back surgery. You're like
the $6 million man now, so you're going to live forever. Okay, I got it. Keep going.
Right. I'm bionic, bro. You got to get on my level. So so Troy dies, his wife takes over the equity, and everything's fine at first, right? Maybe we take that little bit out and we pay for somebody to come in and do what Troy does, and his wife's got this equity and everything. Well, first off, when she has that equity, now when I need to make business decisions, I need to consult with her.
Right.
And here's somebody, his wife, she doesn't necessarily know anything about the decisions that I should be making for this company.
Right.
She's a very brilliant person, but that doesn't mean anything when it comes to our business. And so that's one problem. Now, to add on to that problem, she gets remarried someday.
Right.
Okay. Now, some dude that I have no idea chimes in and is like, hey, you should really have a bigger role in this thing, and you have equity, and you should be getting paid more, and you should, and whatever. All of a sudden, now I'm not just dealing with her and a great person that she was and is when she was married to you.
Right.
I'm dealing with her and this new dude. And then, he took it even further than that. And this is all worst case scenario, but it's something to think about. All of a sudden, what if she becomes an alcoholic or a druggie? And then all of a sudden she's dragging that into the whole situation.
Right.
Who knows what could happen? And we were like, oh, yeah, that's true. So in our business, we decided the ownership does not get moved over to the spouse. The ownership does not get moved over to the spouse. What we do with our spouse is we actually have these key man policies that are on us. A percentage of that key man policy gets paid out to the wife, and a percentage comes into the company to help keep business running, replace the person. And that percentage that goes to the wife, that is what they get. They are just bought out and it's done. And bought out's not even the right word because they didn't have the equity, but they're bought out, and the equity of our companies come back to the partner who is still existing. Right? So that's kind of one of the things that we set up in our business. And so it's something to think about for your business, because we had a doctor friend and client who had a great marriage, had a great business, a great practice, set up a second practice. Anyways, things started to fall apart between him and his wife after many, many, many years of wonderful marriage, and the divorce got super ugly.
Yes.
And during that super ugly divorce, he just finally said, forget it. She had 50% of the practice. Her name was on it. She had 50% ownership in the practice. And, when he was married, he thought, of course, I would want, if anything happened to me or if anything, happened to us, we love each other. We'll be amicable. Even if we did separate someday, for the kids' sake, of course we would, everything would be great. Yeah, right. Everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks that until it happens. And so it got so stinking nasty that he finally just said, forget it. She has 50% of this practice, and he shut down the doors and walked away. He said, you take it, and you run it if you want to. Well, she had no ability to do that. So it just shut down, and he knew that's what was going to happen because on her side she was being super nasty, and on his side, it all just got messy. And if anyone's been through a divorce, then hopefully you haven't experienced something like this. But he literally just said, "Fine, forget it," and he walked away from his practice, and she ended up having to shut it down and couldn't keep it going. And think about that. So if your spouse has a percentage of your company or even 50% of your company and you think, well, I just love this person beyond, belief. And even if we got a divorce, we would be fine. Well, I can tell you, I have seen it firsthand. That's not how it usually goes.
Yeah, I think the motto here is hope for the best, but plan for the worst.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
So if your wife does have ownership in the company, do you guys have something in place if your situation changes?
Right.
Because most likely, and a lot of businesses that do, the wife is working in the business.
Yeah.
A lot of them they do, but the wife is not maybe the and when I say this because it can go both ways.
Exactly.
It could be the husband, it could be the wife. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it should be we should be saying spouse.
We should be saying spouses. Yeah. So don't get me wrong, don't take offense. I'm thinking of my doctor friend.
Yes.
And that's why I'm thinking this way. So let me correct that and say spouse. If you and your spouse get a divorce and you're really the one really truly out there doing the work and running the company and doing all of that, and they're not fully essential to the business, when you guys, if you died, they wouldn't know what to do with it, right?
Yeah.
If you get a divorce, they wouldn't know what to do with it. So think about that and think about if you need to have something in place for that. And, I hope this kind of opens up your guys' eyes because it really did open up our eyes to some of the ways that we thought, this is a great idea. We want to make sure that our wives are paid out by the company for the rest of their lives. And, as the lawyers showed us, it just left a door open to a lot of problems. Even if it wasn't ownership or equity, but just payouts, there's always them coming back years later when they get remarried or something like that and saying, you screwed me out of this and I should have equity in this. And, it just could create a lot of problems. So spouses, be careful with what you do with your spouse in your business. All right, Troy, what is the homework for today?
Yeah, and I would just throw in there, again, everybody's situation is different.
Absolutely.
You may be a husband and wife or husband, whatever it might be, wife and wife, and you started the business together and you're both essential to the business, right? You're partners in it, basically.
Absolutely.
So everybody's situation is different, but you just need to think about your situation and plan accordingly.
Absolutely.
So the homework for this week is we want you to take a look at your business and decide if you have things in place and that you have your business structured properly.
Yeah.
And if you don't, if some of these questions we asked you today opened your eyes oh crap.
Yeah.
I've never talked with my partner about that, or I've never talked with my spouse about that. Then pick one of the things that we talked about today and work on it.
Absolutely.
So, again, it could be as simple as just putting together a plan of what happens, in your business if someone dies. It could be, if you've got all that figured out, you could be doing, put together the procedures, right? Pick one thing, go back and listen through this again, pick one thing and start working on it, and then just keep doing that until you have everything in place to protect what you have worked so hard to build.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being with us on another episode of SoTellUs Time. Please like, share, comment, get it out there. Let's grow this, and we will see you guys on the next episode of SoTellUs Time.